Right, good evening. Welcome back. Hope you had a fantastic summer. If you do have a mobile, if you'd like to put it on silent, please. Thank you. Right, huge welcome to our new to us speaker, Allegedly Dave, with Why Great Britain is No Longer Great. Dave is an author, researcher, speaker, and healer, hailing from Sussex. He has active interests in free energy projects, current affairs, and health. His current book is the Human Body Owners Workshop Manual. And this is available from his website, all the W's, allegedlydave.com. Tonight's talk will be rather a jolt to some, apparently, and is part one of at least two. Please welcome Allegedly Dave.
Thank you. Right, so yes, this talk is a bit of a might be a bit of a shock to some. It could be a bit emotive, but when you look into history, history isn't what you think it is. It's always written by the victors, and we don't get to hear the true story behind it. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Why Great Britain is no longer great or British. So before we start, we'll start with some foundational points. The first one is that the Old Testament is a real book of history. Okay, I've been an atheist for about 40 years. It wasn't until recently, and when I discovered the flat Earth, that it basically changed my mind, and I started looking at the Bible. And because I was always an atheist, and I never went to church or Sunday school or anything, I came at reading the Bible from a completely fresh perspective, and with the only prerequisite to reading it was that I'm going to assume that it's not a fable, and it's there's some real, it's a real story. So I read it just like that. So I found that the Old Testament is actually a book of history, and we're going to look at why that is. So the first thing is Noah's Ark was found. How many people heard about this? A few of you. Okay, cool. Well, Noah's Ark was found in around about 1960 was when it was discovered, and the Americans actually sent a team over, basically just to debunk it. So they came back and said, "Oh no, that's just a natural formation," and they ignored it. But there's a guy called Ron Wyatt who went back and had a look at it and found that indeed this is a site of a remains of a massive boat, and this is a high altitude picture of the site. And I assume you can see where it is, right there. And it's roughly the proportions that are set forth in the Bible. So there's another picture of it. Ron was trying to get permission from the Turkish government to excavate it, and they were dragging their heels, and they weren't going to give him permission. But then there was an earthquake, and it did all the excavation for him. And literally he found that under the ground there was petrified wood. It was all petrified wood. He came along with a team which had ground penetrating radar and metal detectors, and they found a superstructure of a boat and metal rivets. And those lines that you can see in the ground there were actually the lines of the metal rivets they were finding. So they actually traced out the shape of a boat. And also they found these ballast stones, which what they used to do at the time was when they had a big boat, they'd tie huge stones over the boat to keep it stable. And just slightly down the valley, they found a load of these ballast stones. So yeah, Noah's Ark was a historical event. The boat was found exactly where the Bible said it would be, in the foothills of Mount Ararat, 70 miles away from the nearest body of water. And the place it was found was called the Valley of the Eight, referencing the 8 people who were on the ark. And as I said, it's the the same dimensions as the boat in Genesis. And as it says at the bottom there, every single culture has a flood story. And I believe that on Mount Everest they found seashells that tell you that Mount Everest was covered at one time in water. Ron Wyatt also found the site of the Red Sea crossing. This was in 1978, and I've got a little film to show, but this is the actual crossing or the path that the Israelites took, and it's much different to the one that's been generally accepted. But he found a particular place called Nuweiba Beach was actually the actual crossing. So we're going to see a little film of what he found.
In 1978, temporarily unable to continue work on Noah's Ark, Ron Wyatt took his two sons, Danny and Ronnie, to a site in Egypt he believed might be where the Red Sea crossing took place. When they arrived at the site on the Gulf of Aqaba, they found a Phoenician-style column lying on the beach. The water had eroded away the inscription, but in 1984, Ron found a matching column on the opposite shore in Saudi Arabia, still standing, with the inscription still intact. He was later able to translate the words Pharaoh, Mizraim, Death, Edom, Yahweh, and Solomon from this second column, and from this he believes these columns were erected by King Solomon and dedicated to Yahweh for the great miracle of the crossing of the sea on dry land. Israel was occupying the Sinai Peninsula at this time in 1978 and moved this first column from the beach and set it in concrete across the road, as you can see here. Diving at this site, they filmed numerous coral-encrusted chariot parts, such as these two chariot wheels still attached to an axle, one wheel flat on the ground and the other in the air. This is a six-spoked wheel. They found a vast amount of artifacts which loudly attest to the miracle which occurred here. Horse and human skeletal remains are still preserved by the coral, as are chariot cabs without wheels, wheels without cabs, some wheels on axles, and some not. He retrieved a chariot wheel hub, which he presented to Nassif Mohammed Hassan, who was the director of antiquities in Cairo, Egypt. But the most astounding find was this gold-veneered four-spoke chariot wheel, which he was able to video in March of 1988, but he was unable to retrieve it as the wood had disintegrated, leaving only a thin gold shell. There were many factors which led Ron to this site, but three were most compelling. First, in order for the Israelites to have left Egypt proper, they would have had to have begun their journey to the Red Sea on the eastern side of the Gulf of Suez. This left only the Gulf of Aqaba. Second, there is only one place along the shoreline of the Gulf of Aqaba which could hold the perhaps 3 million people. This area is so large it can be seen from this satellite photo. And finally, when Ron studied the bathymetric maps of the British Admiralty in London, he saw a perfect underwater pathway led across the Gulf at this point. On either side of this line across the Gulf of Aqaba, the waters were 5,000 feet deep, dropping off like a deep gorge. But here, at this precise spot, was an area leading across which gently sloped at a 6-degree angle to a depth of only 900 to 1,000 feet in the center.
So there you have it. he literally found the site of the crossing. So there was a lot of other physical evidence. In the Bible, there's a story of the split rock at Horeb, where Moses tapped a rock and it split and water started gushing out. They found the rock. They literally followed the site followed the path that was laid out in the Bible, and they found these landmarks. There's also some other physical evidence. This here is called the Ipuwer Papyrus, which is in the Leiden Museum in Holland. And it's an account from an ordinary Egyptian person of the Exodus and the plagues and everything. So that's basically physical evidence that this thing actually happened. There's also this thing called the Famine Stele, which is an accounting of the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. So physical evidence there. He also went on to find the real Mount Sinai, this burnt peak mountain, and he actually found Sodom and Gomorrah, which is very interesting because on the site, which was totally desolate, he found lots of pockmarks in the ground and in rocks. And when he broke a rock open, inside was a perfect ball of sulfur, pure sulfur. They can't actually make sulfur that pure, but the sulfur was burning as it came down, and it melted the rocks as it hit, and the melted rock actually closed over it. So you found loads and loads of these perfect balls of sulfur, preserved in the rocks. And there was also the pillar of salt was found as well, but that hasn't really been verified. I can't everything that is said as true, but yeah, the pillar of salt was found, but there's only one source of verification, and so I'm not going to really count that. So foundation point 2, the Israelites were black people. Okay, they weren't these Jewish people, and so we're going to go into why that is. So no, the Egyptians weren't white people, I'm afraid. Even though all the films that you see and all the illustrations they show white people, it's kind of obvious that the people living in northeast Africa were black people. So the biblical Israelites were black. It says that Ham, this is according to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, Ham was a progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes. They're separate people. But the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, Canaanites. So it's telling you there that, again, the Egyptians and what became the Africans were black people. So going through the Bible, I'm not going to go through all of these, but Joseph in the Bible was so much like an Egyptian that his own brothers didn't recognise him. So obviously he looked like an Egyptian, so the Israelites were black people. Moses was also an Israelite, but he was raised under the nose of Pharaoh, so he'd kind of stand out if he was a white guy. And he was also mistaken as an Egyptian by the daughters of the priest of Midian. And also Moses' sister, Miriam, was turned white as a punishment. So Charlton Heston played Moses in the Ten Commandments film. There was a bit they left out of that film, was when the Most High, as a test or a demonstration of his power, he told Moses to put his hand into his tunic and then take it out, and his hand had turned white. Well, that's something that Charlton Heston couldn't really do, So I suppose it does look a bit paler, So it tells you that Moses actually looked very different to Charlton Heston. So there's a lot more biblical references that tell you that the Israelites were actually black people, but you can go through it in the Bible. And throughout the what's called the Renaissance period, all of the artwork was replaced throughout Europe, but because Russia, it was a kind of insular society at that time, Renaissance didn't get to Russia. So you can go online and search for Russian icons, and you'll find that everybody who was portrayed in the Bible were portrayed black. And yeah, after the Renaissance, all that artwork was destroyed and replaced with whitenized versions. But 500 years ago, prior to 500 years ago, this is how they were always depicted. And the last thing is that this man is the ex-president of Egypt, and he was quoted on television to say, "We can't accept the Jews because they left here black but came back white." So, and he literally said that on television. And yeah, he was murdered not long after that.
What the forbidden race Nubians?
Say that again?
Nubians,
What about it?
the black, they were to do with the black pharaohs.
Right, again,
They were discriminated against by the Ethnic Society of 1932, and all their artwork was eradicated.
that happened too, but
Nubians.
the Nubians were also
Were the pharaohs who mixed with the Egyptians.
indeed, but the Nubians were also part of the ones that I described.
Tall race, 10-foot tall people.
I'm coming to that. The last point I'm going to make on this is that Africans and Negroes are two different peoples. Race and skin colour are really a red herring. Okay, it's a kind of divisive lie that has been put about, and I'm going to go into this a bit more in detail. But to separate people by perceived race is a distraction. Okay, so we all think that all black people are the same, basically, but they're not. Africans and Negroes are different. They have a different skeletal structure, different skull shape, and one interesting thing is African people, real Africans, cannot grow hair like Negroes can. So African men cannot grow beards. All right? African women cannot grow afros. Right? It's a very powerful thing. If you see real African women, you'll see that they've always got very, very short hair because they can't grow it. So we're going to start with Genesis, okay? And this is going to take a quite long route, but there needs to be a bit of a foundation before we get into where Britain comes in. So very quickly, Adam was not the very first man. The Bible is only covering a period of time which is about 7,000 years, the last 7,000 years of Earth's history. It doesn't cover before that period. There were people before that period, and the first verses of the Bible actually tell you that if you read it properly and you read it with the translating the Paleo-Hebrew. Some of the words aren't translated quite correctly, and gives you the impression that it's all happening contemporaneously, but it's not. It's actually there's like a gap period in between the first two verses. Eve was seduced by more than just an apple. Yeah, the actual event was Eve having sex with an angel called Samael, or he'd be called Satan, and their DNA was corrupted. Okay, it was almost a foreshadowing of a later event. And Eve taught this forbidden knowledge to Adam, because Adam was supposed to be immortal. That was his job, was to be the governor of this world, and he was supposed to be immortal. But the corruption by Satan basically stopped that. So Eve had sons with two different fathers. Cain had the wicked serpent DNA, and this is the characteristic of when the angels mix with humans. There's the offspring are very different and wicked. So let's move on. So this is a line in the Bible, Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So it's only one line in the Bible, one or two lines in the Bible, but if you look in the book of Enoch, it goes into much more detail. There's no mistaking what they're trying to say in the book of Enoch, that angels came down and had sex with women and so produced offspring. Now the Bible only talks about one type of offspring, the Nephilim, who were giants, but according to the book of Enoch, there were different types of offspring who were just as different. So these are the fallen angels that wandered down to Mount Hermon. The interesting thing about Mount Hermon is that when Paris was the prime meridian, Mount Hermon was 33 degrees north and 33 degrees east. So those numbers are kind of significant to certain people. So one type of the offspring were Nephilim, but as I said, there were others. But the point is that the human genetic code was corrupted. So let's look at the traits of the Nephilim. Shouldn't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Giantism, 6 fingers and toes, 2 rows of teeth, extra body hair, extra vertebrae, a tail, and there's a big one, lack of melanin in the skin, blue or green eyes, red or blonde hair, Rh negative blood. And I know there's a couple of people who've got Rh negative blood in here. And a certain type of intelligence and wickedness, psychopathy. These things were introduced into mankind. So I'm going to go through them. Giantism is still around. Okay, well, it's kind of masked. I was actually looking for giants on Google Images, and interestingly, even though in America the basketball players are huge, some of them are over 7 foot, none of them came up when I was looking for giants. So, you know, we've been conditioned to accept people of amazing height as maybe a little bit of an oddity, but and also that when we look in the Guinness Book of Records, we'll see actually very disabled people who are giants, who aren't physically very strong, but literally we have giants walking the earth today who are anatomically, correct and strong, powerful people. There's that guy there. He's huge. If you see him in the ring, he's a boxer. You see him in the ring against a normal sized boxer, it's just like, it's David and Goliath. The first generation of the Nephilim were actually 450 foot tall, according to the Book of Remembrance, the Bible. But it might sound incredible they got to that height, but when you look at the parallels in other cultures, like the Greeks, they talk about the Titans. Anybody seen the film Clash of the Titans? Yeah? Well, there's a sequence in there where you see 450 foot giants fighting. It's telling you that, this story basically has moved across different cultures, but these things existed at one time. And as they mixed with humanity, they got smaller and smaller. 6 fingers and toes. This again is actually more common than you can imagine. This is a whole family with that genetic trait. Halle Berry has 6 toes. Don't know if anybody knew that. So does Oprah. There are many more people that you can imagine have this thing. And when you look at, for instance, the Native American culture, you're used to hearing about the Indians go how, but they never said how, but they always used to hold their hands up just to see, are you human? Are you one of us? Also with nature, the Rh negative blood, when you mix Rh positive blood and negative blood, it starts to curdle, okay, because they're incompatible, and I'll go into that in a little while, but they're incompatible. So when the Native Americans or Aboriginal Americans used to do the blood brothers thing, where they cut their hand and mix their blood, they were actually checking to see if they had the same type of blood. More than one row of teeth. Again, this happens as well. It turns out that the human body is actually perfect, but what we have is an infiltration of a different bloodline, which causes genetic mutations. The human body does not mutate naturally. Yeah? Any mutation is caused by this foreign DNA in the human genome. Extra body hair. There are a lot of people that you see walking around that look quite normal, but like this guy here, is shaved down to his neck, round his collar. You know, if they took their shirt off, there'd be yetis underneath. Yeah. Again, this is another thing that's more common than most people realise. Extra vertebrae and a tail. Again, this happens again more often than people realise. In this country and the Western countries, when a baby's born with a tail, it's whipped off very, very quickly. Nobody even gets to hear about it. But there are other cultures where they don't immediately cut it off, or sometimes they don't even bother with it at all. But it's one of those things that still crops up these days, because just like in the days of Noah, right, we're all corrupted by this DNA. We're all corrupted by it. It's become all pervasive. And sorry to say this in the room full of white faces here, white skin isn't natural to this earth. And you know, I'm not trying to say it to be horrible or anything, but it's, you know, how does it make sense that, you know, you can be out in the sun and not be tolerant of it? You know, the sun gives this world life. It's literally a different DNA has pervaded this world, and this DNA does not belong here. And as I said, we're all, in one respect or another, we're all corrupted by it. I've got not much to say about blue or green eyes. The blue or green are eyes that don't have melanin, just like skin not having melanin. If their eyes are blue or green, it's showing a lack of melanin. Blue is the greatest lack, green slightly less, and then hazel is has slightly more. So with me, I've got excess body hair and I've got green eyes. So you know, most of us in this world are corrupted by this DNA. Rh negative blood. Now this is a bit of a smoking gun, really, because Rh negative blood is blood with a lack of a certain protein on the red blood cells. Okay, only 15% of the human population are lacking in this protein. But interestingly, it's only 15% of the human population. All other animals have this protein coating on their blood, and it's incompatible with the rest of humanity. When a Rh negative woman conceives of an Rh positive man, the woman's antibodies will attack the baby as a foreign object. Yeah? The baby will have difficulty surviving unless they're given a shot which suppresses the mother's immune system. Yeah? So it's telling you right there that this blood type, which is, has everybody heard of Rh negative blood?
Yeah,
Audience part.
Statement's not entirely true. I know an Rh negative and positive couple who didn't have that problem.
Right. Well, what usually happens these days is that the first baby, right, makes it through, but then the mother's immune system becomes sensitized to it, and then the second one. Sorry.
She had 3 children.
Well, you know what? You can't with people. You can't say everybody is like this. You'll get exceptions along the way, but generally, this is what happens. You get a long time ago. It was the first baby will be attacked. Yeah, but then as people got used to it, it's more like the second baby, and maybe some people never have it, but generally, can only speak in general terms when you're talking about humans. Yeah. Where was I? Oh yeah. Well, scientists don't know where this mutation came from. They've got no idea where it came from. It doesn't, there's no way it can appear naturally, because as I say, it doesn't appear naturally in any species on this earth. And as I said, it's incompatible with the rest of the human species. It's also got a high copper content, which gives it a slightly blue tinge, which is where the term blue bloods came from, because the royal families are Rh negative. We found that out when Prince Charles gave blood back in the 80s. He was Rh negative. So yeah, that's where the term came from, because in the past it was the royalty who had the Rh negative blood types. And yeah, they derive their divine right to rule because they have the blood of the gods. They don't tell you which gods, though. Cunning and wickedness. As I said, this is about a bloodline. Yeah, skin color, and race are a distraction. This is about a bloodline, and it's only one bloodline that controls all the corporations in this world. Yeah, it's only one bloodline that controls the banks. It's only one bloodline that's responsible for all the misery that's perpetrated on this earth. It's a wicked bloodline, yeah, and it hates humans. It hates all of us. Okay. So, this is the parallel. You know how the elite like to rub stuff in our noses and rub stuff in our faces, like what they're doing and what's happened. Well, I believe the story of Alien is what's happened on this earth. Yeah, that alien. The only way it could sort of I don't know the word I'm looking for. The only way it could procreate is to impregnate humans. Okay, and I don't know if anyone saw the very last Alien film with Sigourney Weaver in it, but the alien in that film actually started looking human. It was human shaped and had a slightly human skeletal face, but that's the point. It was mixing with humans and it became more and more human-like. Okay, and when you look back into the fossil record, you find there are these creatures that look vaguely human, but they have these massive skulls. And I'd suggest that these ones were the only ones that survived, but earlier ones would have had a much longer head, just like the alien. So in Genesis 6:12, it says that essentially that these things had corrupted everyone apart from one family, and literally there was evil all over the earth, and these things were running wild. And by the way, there are a lot of people who say that the Old Testament is a bloodthirsty book with a bloodthirsty God who wants to kill everybody, men, women, and children. And yes, absolutely. But imagine this: if you were to find a whole village full of those aliens from Alien, yeah, would you hesitate to kill every last, male, female, and egg? Would you? Really? Audience participation. See, the point that's missed in the Bible is that the things that the Israelites were told to go in and utterly destroy were not humans. Yeah, they were sort of, precursors to what we are now. There were these hybrids that looked vaguely human, but were utterly evil, that would kill and eat humans. So Noah was the only Noah's family were the only ones who weren't corrupted by this. But it says in the book of Jasher that a week before the flood, Noah had to go out and find wives for his 3 sons. but the only wives that were available were corrupted ones. So this DNA survived the flood through the offspring of the union of the Noah's children and these corrupted wives. So these are the three sons of Noah, Ham, Shem and Japheth. So the serpent seed survives. Amongst Ham's children were the Canaanites, the Raphites, the Amalekites, and all the ites in the Bible who are described as giants, as six-fingered giants. Okay, so Ham's line was corrupted. In Japheth's line, there was at least one giant. He was called Gog, and but in Shem's line, there were no giants. There were no genetic deformations or genetic anomalies. So his line was the blessed line. His line was the human line. That's what the Bible is telling us. And that is until Esau was born. Okay, the story is that the children of Isaac, who were twins, Jacob and Esau. Esau was the firstborn, and he came out red and hairy, and he became a hunter, and he was wicked and very cunning. So he was expressing the fallen angel DNA. Jacob was not even described because he came out like everybody else. But because Jacob was the human one with the most human DNA, he was given the blessing, even though he was the second born, which goes against tradition.
But he tricked the blessing out of his father.
Yes, but that's the story. This is I can go into lots more detail about it, but I've got lots to go through, so I'm not going to go into the sort of the minutiae. But yes, he tricked his father into it.
He displayed cunning.
No, his mother did. His mother did.
His mother got him to do it.
Yes, his mother did. Right. So, but I'm not going to go into detail. But you can go in and read it yourself. And I know. Okay. Yeah. So Esau became known as Edom, which means red. And after he gave up his birthright, I said he was wicked and cunning and warlike. And he went on to take wives of all the other nations. Eventually, his children basically mixed with all the other nations. And again, his offspring were generally very tall, white-skinned, red-haired, and red-haired giants, basically. So the Israelites, there were 12 sons of Israel, and I'm not going to go too much into this, but the sons of Jacob became the Israelites. So the Israelites actually were in a blood covenant with the Creator, and were given these commandments to follow. But in Deuteronomy 28, they were told that if they were to keep the commandments, they would be blessed and have all sorts of good things happen to them. But if they weren't to keep the commandments, they were going to be punished. And one of the main punishment was that they were going to go into slavery and affliction. So that started essentially with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD by the Romans. And I don't like quoting the New Testament because I don't believe very much about it. But it says in the New Testament, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then flee into the mountains. And the only mountains that were available to them were the mountains of Africa, and that's where they went. Now, this is a map of Africa from the 1700s, and you can see what it's called down here. Right, Negro land, okay? Because what happened was the Israelites escaped into Africa, the African continent, but the Africans didn't want them there amongst themselves, because I guess they still remembered the plagues and the Exodus. So the Israelites basically went across the top of the Sahara, which you'll notice is called the Kingdom of Sarah, okay, which is the second son of Judah, by the way. So they went across the Sahara Desert and down into the wilderness, which is where nobody was living, of West and South Africa. So here's a bit more detail here. So this bit here is called the Grain Coast. It's where the Europeans came in to get their grain. Here's the Tooth Coast. It's where they came in to get their ivory. There's the Gold Coast. No explanation there. And here is the Slave Coast. And where it says there, Kingdom of Judah. So they're the sons of Judah actually ended up there. Here next to it is what's called Benin. I can't see it, but the Kingdom of Benin is here. Now the people who lived in Jerusalem, that side of the part of Jerusalem that got attacked by the Romans, were the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, or Benjamin. So here you have the Judeans and the Benjamites. And right now, the Jews are still there. Ones that weren't taken into slavery are actually still there. These there are a couple of, quite a load of tribes out there. The Lemba, and these guys are from the Lemba, have been acknowledged now as people of that area, Judea. There's another tribe of interest called the Igbo or the Ibo, which we'll come back to later. So yeah, in Psalms it tells you that that all the nations were going to come against these people, and they were going to make sure that their name would be forgotten, and they would forget who they are, and that's what's happened. And all these nations are confederate against them. These are all the nations that Esau mixed with. Because Esau felt cheated of his birthright, yeah, the ancestral hatred has remained, yeah, even though he's been spread out across all these different nations. So when the Europeans came to get slaves, not a single African went into slavery. What happened was the slavers came for the Judeans, the Negroes, and it was the Africans who actually sold them into slavery. It was the Arabs and the Africans who sold them into slavery. Right? They didn't sell themselves into slavery. It was the Africans were selling the outsiders, the ones who came in and were actually prospering in the wilderness of their land. So that dispels that myth that Africans were selling each other into slavery. Again, it's not about skin colour, it's about nation, it's about bloodline. So this is commonly seen as the African slave trade, but there was much more to this story. Because the Aboriginal Americans were the same people. They were already there in America, and they were black people. They were not the pale-skinned Indians that you're kind of used to. These guys were all, and that looks like my mum actually. that one right there. These were the same people that were over in Africa and also in Europe. I'll get to that in a minute. But what happened was we had black people as the Aboriginal Americans, but there were also some Chinese Mongols who went across the Bering Strait and were inhabiting the northwest of America. And it was those people who actually were given all the reservations. All these people were reclassified as black people, as Negroes, as slaves. I think, and here's the evidence. This is called the Back Creek Stone. And it sat in a museum. It was taken from a Cherokee reservation. It was part of a huge war on the Cherokee reservation, dated 4,000 years old. and it sat there as a bit of a curiosity because nobody could translate it. And until a Hebrew scholar came up and looked at it and realised it was being displayed upside down, and it was actually Hebrew, and it says something like for the Judeans, and I said it's part of a larger wall, but this is the only bit that survived. So they were actually writing in Hebrew 4,000 years ago. So yeah, this is what happened. The Aboriginal Americans were reclassified as black, Negro, and slaves, and the Native Americans were the Chinese Mongols, who mixed also with white people who came over, because there was a thing called the Dawes Rolls, which meant they were classifying who was who, and anybody could come along, any white European could come along and pay $5 to be included as an Indian, which meant they get certain rights. They get a piece of land that's not taxable and stuff like that. So there's a saying called the $5 Indian. Yeah? So you could pay $5 and you could be classified as Indian, and you'd get all the rights and benefits of being a Native American. But these were not the original Aboriginal Americans. They also, the slaves also came from Europe, and this is the evidence of it. Obviously, evidence of this kind is kind of scant. You can't find very much around, but every now and again you find some bit of writing that gives you clues. This is from Benjamin Franklin, 1751, and he says, why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of us Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? Okay, saying that they were black people. Says, which leads me to add one remark: the number of purely white people in the world is proportionably very small. All of Africa is black or tawny, brown. Asia, chiefly tawny. America, exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion. Swarthy means black. As are the Germans also. Okay, so he underlines the point: why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America? So literally, the Germans and most Europeans at that time, 1751, were black people. Yeah, history has been rewritten. So this is one of the journeys of the people from the what's known as the Holy Land, from Israel right now. These are the people called the Iba. Again, very similar to the Ibo and the Igbo tribes in Africa, because Iba comes from the patriarch Eba, who was where the name Hebrew comes from. Okay, so the Iba travelled across southern Europe and ended up in a place they named after themselves, the Iberian Peninsula. And when they were chased out of that area by the barbarians, they founded another country called Hibernia. Again, they named it after themselves. Hibernia means land of the Hebrews. And some of them went on to colonise another country, Scotland. And the only name that survives is Hebrides. Okay. So the Irish were originally black people, and this is an illustration from a magazine, Harper's Weekly, from the 1800s, and it actually tells you in there, if I'd left the whole thing, it says the Iberians were believed to originally be an African race, okay? And you can see how the Irish Iberians started off like this, mixed with these, and became, this was kind of sort of midway transitional stage. But if you look at the Iberian writing of the time, it's almost exactly the same as the Paleo-Hebrew script, right? Saying that these guys came from Jerusalem, basically. More sort of evidence of it is in the Ulster flag. Now, I mentioned the kingdom of Sahara as being the Sahara Desert. Well, Zara was the second son of Judah in the Bible, and his story is that when their mother was pregnant, he's one of twins. When their mother was pregnant with them, the midwife was trying to birth them, and Zara stuck his hand out at the womb. So they thought, this is going to be the firstborn. So they tied a scarlet thread around his hand, and then he pulled his hand back in, and his brother was born first. Okay, so after that, Zara was known as the Red Hand, and in the Ulster flag, you've got the red hand, Star of David, which is not really a Star of David, and the crown is signifying that this was the place of the royal family, basically the royal bloodline of Judah. Oops. So, how much time have I got? I'm just trying. Another 5. Okay, so I'll just go on about. Sorry to jump around a bit, but this is all relevant. It will all be pulled together in a little while. So we're going to ask who were the ancient Greeks, because we've seen lots of statues and depictions of pale-skinned Greeks and stuff. But if you go back further and you look at some older artifacts, you'll find that they're all black. So who were they? Well, there were 3 levels of Greek culture. Now, the first one was, if you look in the Bible, it tells you that a person called Jevan was given the area of Greece. But since there was no J in Hebrew or E, or so Jevan, yeah. So it would have been pronounced Iowan. Okay. So those people were known as the Ionians. Later there were some Israelites, Danites, and Judites who left the Egypt before the Exodus. They became known as Adorians, and then finally, the white-skinned Macedonians took over the area, and they were known as the Corinthians. And if anybody knows about Greek architecture, there were 3 styles of architecture: Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian. Okay. Now, what's interesting is that from Mount Seir, where Esau basically ended up living, it's modern-day Petra. You can see Corinthian-style columns on their architecture, and you can actually follow their progress around the world. In Greece, the Corinthian; in Rome, the same; Germany, this country, and America. And this is their path across the world over the centuries. And this is the path of that particular bloodline. So, on a similar note, who were the Spartans? In one of the books that were left out of the Bible, the Maccabees, it tells you that the Spartans were brethren of the Jews there, the Judites there. There's a letter to the Lacedaemonians, as they were called, saying, "Look, we're brothers. Let's make a pact. And let's join together." So it tells you right there that the Spartans were actually black people as well. So that film should have had Denzel Washington playing the guy. So yeah. So, and who were the Trojans? Well, this was quite amazing for me, because I just happened to be reading the Iliad at one point, and I was researching this. And as I was looking at the genealogy chart in the 1611 Bible, the names started to match up with what I was reading in the Iliad. So one of the sons, or great-great-grandsons of Judah, was a guy called Dada. And again, it's in the Iliad that Dada, or Dardanus, was the father of Erichthonius, who was the father of King Tros, who founded Troy. So again, the Israelites were the Trojans. So the Trojans were black too. And I think I've run out of time there for now, so I'm going to leave it there. And I know we've not touched Britain yet, but the second half is all about Britain. So, okay. Thank you. All right. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. So the founding of Britain. Britain actually started through a black Hebrew Israelite who was a Trojan prince. Okay, his name was Brito. It's been anglicised to Brutus. And what happened was, after the fall of Troy, he set out with 300 ships off to find a mythical land in the west. Okay, it's not written there, but he actually went in. He landed in France at one point. He sailed up a French river and started fighting the French, the pre-French, I guess. And him and his men basically fought their way all the way into the interior of France, and realised that they were kind of cut off. His men were kind of stuck in the middle of France, surrounded by their enemies, and thought, well, we're not going to do very much here, so let's leave. But obviously their mark is still there, Brittany. Yeah, in the past, places got named after the people that were there. So Brittany, Bretagne, is a mark that this man was there. What happened was Brutus, Brito, landed in 1103 BC in Totnes, of all places.
That's correct.
Yeah.
There's a stone there.
Well, we'll get into that. Yeah, so when he landed here, he found that the country was overrun with red-headed giants. And the king of the giants was called Albion. And that's, again, places were named after the people. So the country was called Albion. So essentially, Brito and his men killed all the giants apart from one, Albion's brother, called Gog-Magog. He left Gog-Magog alive because one of Brito's men, Quirinius, wanted to fight this 18-foot giant. Right, so the giant was kind of nursed back to health. He had to be nursed back to health so he could fight Quirinius. And this epic battle occurred on Plymouth Hoe. And what happened was Quirinius ended up throwing Gog-Magog over the cliff onto the rocks. And the place was called Lam Go Mago, which means Giant's Leap. Okay, but now it's called Plymouth Hoe. So Britannia, or Britannia, was named after Brito or Brutus. Brito in Hebrew is basically something like holder of the covenant. Okay, Britannia means land of the covenant. This is the covenant between Abraham and the Most High. Okay, the Creator, specified in the Bible. When Brutus founded his capital city, he called it Troyanova, New Troy. Okay, there's a tribe near London called Trinovantes, which is telling you that these people lived near New Troy. And yeah, the Romans renamed it Londinium. So Brutus was part of the royal family. He descended from Judah. He's part of the real royal family. The real royal family is descendant of King David. So he was a direct descendant of King David, part of the Zara side of the family.
Not Pharaohs.
Sorry? Not Pharaohs, no.
Pharaohs was the one that got the inheritance.
Yeah, but still, Zara was part of the royal bloodline.
Ah, but he was born second.
I know,
He
but
cleared off.
yeah, but the
The royal line comes
he's
down.
still part of the royal line of Judah, but
Yeah,
Phares had the birthright. Yeah, but you'll see what happens is they connect together in the end
All right.
in a bloodline. So yeah, the proof of this is in 4th Street in Totnes. You can go right in the street. There's the Brutus Stone, which is where he's said to have set foot in Totnes. Also in London, the Church of St Swithin, there's a stone which Brutus brought from Troy, and again you can go to that church and see it. And I already mentioned about the Trinovantes. Also, this is a tapestry showing the epic battle between Corineus and the red-haired giant at Plymouth Hoe. So Corineus, after his epic battle, he was given Cornwall, and that's Cornwall was actually named after Corineus. And yeah, there were up until I think it was 1486. There were chalk drawings of 2 giants, or one giant and a smaller man. This was commemorating Corineus and Gog Magog. And right here, there's a news story saying that they want to recreate the chalk drawings on Plymouth Hoe. So, and also in the Lord Mayor's Parade in London, they parade 2 giants, Gog and Magog. It's just a corruption of Gog, Magog and Corineus. So, as I said, Britain, or British, means land of the covenant. It's a Hebrew word. And as I said, it's a covenant between the Hebrews and the Creator. So, are we keeping the covenant? Just a quick word about the Anglo-Saxons. The word Saxon actually means sons of Isaac. Okay? The Anglo-Saxons means the angelic sons of Isaac. The angelic sons, and there's been some confusion about this, the angelic sons are the ones that exhibited the fallen angel seed. So the original Saxons were dark-skinned, and the Anglo-Saxons were lighter-skinned. And I didn't actually mention this when I was talking about Greece, but this is the modus operandi of this bloodline. Okay, what they would do is, when there was a population they wanted to conquer, they would infiltrate this population. They would sort of arrive in few numbers, and then some more and a few more, until they had enough power, and they would take over that population, become those people, and rewrite history so you don't know about those people. Okay? And the same thing happened in Germany, Saxony. There was the original Saxons, and then this bloodline came in, took over, and they became the Anglo-Saxons.
According to my etymological research, the word Saxon, it derives from the fact that they carried a blade called a saxon.
Right, well,
Were they to be called, if Isaac's son was a derivation of that, surely it would be Yitzhak Ben would be the correct Hebrew term.
well, when we're not talking about Hebrews, we're talking about when they came away from
You just
Hebrew.
said that's the origin of the word Saxon.
Sorry? No, I'm disputing what you were saying about why it should have been called. Yeah, when you move away from the original language, the language changes. Okay, right? We're talking about it from the point of view of anglicising things. Yeah, so we anglicise just like we anglicise Brito to Brutus. Yeah, we might have different sources, but my research says they're sons of Isaac and angelic sons of Isaac. Okay, so I was looking at this book from, I can't remember how old it is, The Origins of the Anglo-Saxon Race. Surnames are a very recent thing. Okay, people weren't given surnames as a rule. They were just sort of extra identifiers. because there might be 2 or 3 Daves in a place. So, you know, if I was good at making roofs, I'd be called Dave Thatcher, you know, or if somebody was good at shoeing horses, Dave Smith, you know. But another identifier was what a person looked like. You know, there's also where a person lived, you know, Dave York or Dave Atwood, you know, Dave who lives at the woods. Or, as I said, or their physical exploits, like Dave Armstrong, okay? So you get names like Brun, Brown, Black, Blackman, Blake, and all the derivations of that. I won't go into the Wendish people. So one of the chapters in this book about the origin of the Anglo-Saxon race is a chapter called Our Darker Forefathers. And it says here, you know, there is a higher percentage of people of a mixed brown type living in Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Wiltshire, Dorset than most other counties, except those in Cornwall or on the old Celtic borders. The inhabitants of these counties are the darkest. Okay? The counties of Hereford and Buckinghamshire have people as dark as Wales. Yeah? The Welsh were a dark people. I didn't show you on that map that showed the progress of the Iber. There was another migration for the people of who descended from the King Omri in the Bible. Okay, they called themselves the Cymri or the Cimmerians. Okay, they went across the northern part of Europe and ended up in Denmark, Jutland. And they were chased out of that area, and they went. Sorry.
Caucasians.
Sorry.
They went through the Caucasus.
They went through the Crimea and but I don't have the map there. I can't show you, but they ended up in Jutland and they got chased out. They ended up in England and got pushed to the far west. And the Cymri became the Cymru, so they were the Welsh. So it kind of brings us to King James the sixth and the first. He was a black man. Okay. Now you can go to the National Portrait Gallery and you'll see a white guy looking back at you, but those portraits were basically repainted. Okay. What couldn't be painted over were engravings. And in the 1611 Bible, there's an engraving of a black man. He was actually, again, an Israelite of the royal house of Judah, descended from the Pharaoh's line, okay, that came in through France. Sorry? Yeah, got that, told you. Yeah, so he was the one who had the Bible translated as faithfully as possible at the time, because it says in the foreword, actually, that there were people, and he meant the Roman Catholic Church, who wanted to destroy the word of the Most High. And he didn't want that to happen. So that's why he had the Bible translated. He sat on the thrones of England, Scotland, Ireland, and France, actually. And he unified them into one kingdom. And as I said, there's the bogus painting of James. He's been smeared with allegations of homosexuality and sleeping with his mother, but they're all baseless claims. Because how can you be homosexual and have 9 children with your wife? You have to have an awful lot of sex to get 9 children, I think. So yeah, more pictures, engravings of him. And there's an engraving of James and his wife Anne of Denmark with a afro. Yeah. So he reunited the tribes of Israel in England. Right? The Union Jack means the reunification of Jacob. Okay, that's why under the throne, the coronation throne, is the stone of Scone, which is the stone of destiny, the stone of Jacob, the stone that Jacob rested his head on when he wrestled with an wrestled with an angel. Same thing, really. So yeah, that's why that stone is there, because this country is the New Jerusalem. You know, I probably wondered why that song Jerusalem comes from. Guy Fawkes was actually an agent of the Roman Catholic Church, and he wasn't about trying to get rid of Parliament. He was trying to assassinate James. Yeah, because the Roman Catholic Church wanted to stop the Bible being translated.
Well, Parliament was Protestant anyway, so that would have served them as well.
Probably,
Jesuit-
but the main aim was to kill James. So this is James' grandson, Charles II. Okay, there's also a white-niced version of him, but one painting did survive, and it matches up with again an engraving of Charles II, and he was the last of the Stuart line. And what happened was the Roman Catholic Church, or let's put it the Ashkenazi bloodline, basically finally succeeded in removing this royal line off the throne, and they replaced it with an Ashkenazi German bloodline. So, what happened to the black peoples of the British Isles? Well, if you look closely at, I just want to draw your attention to one of the definitions of Negro. Number 3, any person with some Negro ancestors. Okay, just keep that in mind. This is, I'm just going to show you here, this is an example of what happened to these people.
The trouble with Scotland is that it's full of Scots. Perhaps the time has come to reinstitute an old custom. Grant them prima nocte. First night, when any common girl inhabiting their lands is married, our nobles shall have sexual rights to her on the night of her wedding. If we can't get them out, we'll breed them out.
So that's basically what happened to them. They were the ones that remained in this country, and I'm going to go a bit into that in a little while, but ones that remained in this country were essentially just bred out. And I'm just going to show you what that process looks like.
As you know, every Aborigine born in this state comes under my control. Notice, if you will, the half-caste child. And there are ever-increasing numbers of them. Now, what is to happen to them? Are we to allow the creation of an unwanted third race? Should the coloureds be encouraged to go back to the black? Or should they be advanced to white status and be absorbed in the white population? Now, time and again, I am asked by some white man, if I marry this coloured person, will our children be black? And as Chief Protector of Aborigines, it is my responsibility to accept or reject those marriages. Here is the answer. 3 generations. Half-blood grandmother, quadroon daughter, octoroon grandson. Now, as you can see, in the 3rd generation, or 3rd cross, no trace of native origin is apparent. The continuing infiltration of white blood finally stamps out the black colour. The Aboriginal has simply been bred out.
So you see, it only takes 3 generations to remove the colour. This is one.
My grandma has full Zulu.
Yeah. Well, you'll see later on. It's actually more prevalent than you think. Yeah. So while I was researching this, I was looking at a book called "Nature Knows No Colour Lines," and I read this paragraph about the famous writer Dr. Samuel Johnson and his Negro servant Frank Barber, or Francis Barber. And as I was reading this, somebody sent me a video, and it was just amazing. I just happened to be reading this at the right time. and it was this. You know? So there you have it. I mean, that guy, if I walked past him in the street, I'd just assume he was just an ordinary white guy. But, you know, go back to the definition I told you. Yeah, he's a Negro. Yeah, just a white-nosed Negro. And there are many, many people walking around not knowing that they're actually white-nosed Negroes. This is a friend of mine on Facebook, and I was talking to her about this topic, and she suddenly realised, and she said to me, "My dad's black." I didn't know. My dad is black, and there he is underneath there. Yeah, he's got an afro. If you look at his features, you know, he's got black features, except he's got white skin, and his parents were white, but he's a Negro. And Michelle herself is she's Welsh, and you can see in her face, you know, she's got full lips, yeah, that's slightly less full than mine, say. She's got a slightly broader nose, and when the sun comes out, she goes immediately very, very dark. Okay, and I put that next to it from 1911, describing the little dark Welshman, which she descends from. Also from the book Nature Knows No Colour Lines. This is a part of the history of the Moors. Okay, and when I say the Moors, I don't mean you know, the Arab African people. I'm talking about the offspring of Sir Thomas More. Okay, this is from the Welsh. This illustration is from the Welsh. The Yorkshire genealogist. Yeah, showing the heraldry of Sir Thomas More from Yorkshire. The Yorkshire Moors were not a place, they were a people. The Moors around this country are not places, they're about people. I told you the custom was to name places after people. Yeah, so all these places that are named Moor tells you that this was a place where black people lived. So this is another book I was looking at during my research. It's from a guy who was employed as a spy, basically, by the King William, I think King William of Orange, to actually try and figure out who amongst the noblemen they wanted to get rid of, basically. So when you look through this book, it literally gives you a description, a physical description of all the noblemen that were in the court at that time. And I've just sort of taken a sample here. But Charles, Duke of St Albans, yeah, he is of a black complexion, yeah. Charles Fitzroy, hang on a sec. Charles, Duke of St Albans, is the son of King Charles II, yeah. He's a black man and black complexion, sorry. So it's very like the king. Charles Lennox, son of King Charles II. Well-shaped, black complexion, much like King Charles. Same thing. Son to King Charles II, this George Fitzroy. A tall black man, like his father, the king. Yeah, there's no doubt about this. So I went through this book looking at all the descriptions of the noblemen and pulling out their names, because some of them, it gives you the names George Fitzroy and not just their titles. So most people with those names, these names that I pulled out of this book, probably descend from black people. And that's just a sampling of the ones I got from this book. Anybody with a name like that up there? Anybody? Yeah, 1, 2. So British history was all about ethnic cleansing. Yeah. After Charles II was beheaded, they put an Ashkenazi king on the throne, and the Jacobite risings. You've heard of Jacobites and Whigs. Yeah. The Jacobites wanted the return of the black bloodline on the throne, and that's what they were fighting for. The whole of British history has been about ethnic cleansing. The Civil War was a race war. History never made sense to me when I was a kid. Why were these people fighting? When you plug in this race element to it, it starts to make sense. As I said, when you actually look into it, you find that at the end of all this fighting, that most of the Irish were dead or transported to Ireland, to the West Indies. Okay, and 6% of the Scottish were gone as well. And there was, I said in England it was mixed tribes of Saxon and Anglo-Saxon and or let's say dark-coloured people and lighter-skinned people, which again, when the lighter-skinned Anglo-Saxons came over in very small numbers to begin with. They were sort of brought in as fighters for various wars, and as they came in greater numbers, they got enough power to take over, and then they rewrote history in their favour. So right now we have a false bloodline on the throne, a Germanic bloodline. This is the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha-Battenberg family. They're Germans. They're of this Nephilim bloodline. I mentioned that Prince Charles was confirmed to be Rh negative. They're all Rh negative. There's only one family. There's only one royal family throughout this world, because they only marry within their own bloodline. They never marry outside their bloodline. It doesn't matter when they say, Diana was different, and what's the new one? I can't remember her name. Kate. Yeah, she's part of the same bloodline. So this is the false bloodline, and the rest of the bloodline. This isn't quite accurate, because we don't know half of these bloodlines, but we're guessing at some of these. But you've got the Rothschilds up there. You've got some familiar faces there, but there are also Arab parts of this bloodline, and maybe Turkish. I'm not sure, but these are the bloodlines that are oppressing us right now.
The presidents of America are all related.
They're all related. They're all related to this woman.
You've missed out the black nobility.
That's a different. Yeah, I know. That's a whole another area, and I don't have time for that. There's a lot I can't. This would be an 8-hour talk if I put everything in. So sorry.
Families like the Medici are much higher up than any of those.
Yeah. Well, thanks. This is telling you that the public hierarchy isn't really the one that's in private. You can't. You're not supposed to be able to poke royalty in a chest. Yeah. So we get a public image of what this hierarchy is, but it probably bears no relation to the private one. So what we're living in right now is the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire never went away. It just morphed and got and the names changed and everything. But you can see that Europe, which is the base of the Roman Empire, basically colonized and controlled the rest of the world. There's only very few places, I think you can't see it really well, but Korea and Japan and a couple of islands in there. I think right there, I don't know what that is, but yeah, there's only very few places in the world where the Roman Empire doesn't control. And so, yes, going back to what you were saying, one big happy family. Okay, what's your name? Sorry, Jez. Was Jez mentioned? Right, all the presidents are related. What they did was when they conquered a country, they would give that country independence, but they would leave their bloodline behind to manage it. Okay, America was never independent. They left their bloodline behind, and as said, all the presidents are of that bloodline, and they're managing the country for this bloodline. So, just to underline the point I was trying to make earlier about, it's not about race, it's not about colour. I've just did a little video.
White is not a skin colour. It is an exclusive membership of a secret society club. There are pale-skinned people who aren't considered white, and there are dark-skinned people who have been classified as white.
I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February. A white coworker came to me and told me right after the function, he said, "You have nothing to do with these people, you have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle, you have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police."
White is a caste system, created and maintained by those who have placed themselves at the top. And while it might seem that the lighter skinned you are, the higher up the caste structure you'll be, those in the higher echelons know that it's really about bloodline and DNA. The benefits of membership seem very desirable: privilege, wealth, celebrity, power. But these worldly things that this bloodline controls are just superficial, transitory, and illusory. Nonetheless, many people think they are or want to be in the club. But as George Carlin says, that's because you can only be a full platinum member by bloodline, by virtue of having the serpent DNA. Switch on the television and you'll see others of a less pure bloodline who have managed to gain bronze or useful idiot membership. And you can fantasize that if somebody discovers that you can sing well or lie to a camera, that maybe you can upgrade to a higher degree, ignorant of the fact that they have had to prove that they're a particular type of ruthless psychopath, literally willing to sign a contract in blood and sacrifice their granny for scraps off the elite's table. The rest assume that because you look like you're a member, that you automatically are one, and so act accordingly. But you have just been brainwashed into believing that you are part of their club, in the same way that you might refer to our military, or say, my team scored a goal. Well, you don't have a military, and it's not your team. You're really just pawns, supporting and perpetuating the caste system, accepting the unspoken privileges, and collaborating in the denial of the same to black people. Blissfully unaware that the real white bloodline considers you as expendable as those who you believe have a lower social status. If you're not a member of the elite families, then it doesn't matter how pale your skin is or how blonde your hair. You will never be white.
So that's just trying to give you the idea that it's not about race, it's not about colour, it's all about bloodline. And this bloodline is at the moment in this process of trying to depopulate the entire world, using all these methods down here. Yeah, and I think everyone's aware of that. Everybody aware of that? Yeah. Yeah. We were given rules to be here, okay, but we're in a society where all those rules have been reversed. Yeah, everything that's in the Ten Commandments have been legalized. You know, people can legally kill. People are allowed to lie and steal. Yeah, every day on the roads, you know, people in uniforms are allowed to steal. But yeah, everything in this society has been reversed.
If you study the human rights, you get deeper into that, you find that it is a complete reversal of the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, legalese as well, that's a whole other topic. But yeah, we're in a completely satanic society. Does everybody get that sense that you know, it's a thoroughly evil society that we're living in and being forced to try and participate in? And I don't know if you're aware that across America they've started putting up statues of the Baphomet. Has anybody heard this story? Yeah, they've literally started putting up statues of Satan and allowing Satan worship in schools and all sorts of places. Yeah, we're going down that path very quickly indeed. So we're still all in slavery. Yeah, when obvious chattel slavery was ended, what they did was bring in this new type of slavery. It was called sharecropping. And I don't know if you're aware of how it works, but what the newly freed slaves were told were, okay, you're free now, but what we're going to do is I'm going to advance you some seed, some tools, some materials, and maybe some horses and whatever, okay? And you can go and, grow your own food and stuff. And at the end of the year, we'll split the profits, and you just pay me back what you owe me for all the things I advanced you. But it was always worked out that they never ever managed to pay their debt, just because they made it so it worked out that way. And it was so successful that it was actually rolled out everywhere. And this is where we are right now. Okay. Of the money that you earn, something like 95% to 97% of it goes in taxes in one form or another. Yeah, so that you never ever progress. Yeah, the odd person might make it, and if they do, they get invited to the club. Simple as that. And if they say yes, well, they join. As long as they do as they're told, they join up and they become part of this elite club as useful idiot. But if you say no, then your business goes down the tubes. Kind of like Richard Branson. Remember a while back, Virgin just started to tank. Do you remember that? It was quite a while back. And then all of a sudden, when Richard Branson decided to play ball, then it went up like a rocket. But yeah, we're still under slavery. It's just economic slavery. Now, one of the biggest enslavements comes from this religion. Okay, it was all created by the same people. All religions throughout the world come from the same people. And this is how they enslaved your mind. I know this might be a bit hard for some people, because I know some people were into Christ and stuff, but this is from what I've gleaned from reading the Bible, over and over and over again. That the New Testament was added to the original book. Yeah, the original book wasn't called the Old Testament; it was called the Book of Remembrance. Right? The Romans renamed it the Old Testament so they could give a New Testament. Right? So, but since the word testament means statement of truth, just you try entering a new statement of truth that contradicts the old one in a murder trial and see how far that gets you. Yeah, it literally doesn't make any sense. But what it does do is it supplies you with a new God. Yeah, and sort of new idols to worship. Wooden crosses and statues and stuff.
That's not what the original Christians did.
Sorry, who said that?
That's not what the original Christians did. They didn't worship idols or point to a God of Catholicism, which is just a baptized paganism.
I'm also, yeah, that's right, but I'm also talking about Christianity, which the clue is in the title, yeah, Christ. Yeah? If you worship Christ, and again, everyone's free to believe whatever they want. Right? I'm just telling you what I've found. If you worship Christ, then you're putting another God before the Most High, in contravention of the first commandment. That's the way I see it. Okay? And I've been, when I started reading the Bible, I did not have a horse in the race. I came at it as a newbie, thinking, okay, whatever the truth is, I'm going to go with that. Okay. Now, if Jesus was in the Old Testament, if Jesus was part of this, then I would be a Jesus worshipper now. But I can't be because, as I said, reading the Old Testament, very clear, no other gods before me. And in this culture, we're a victim of word magic. Okay? With the right use of words, you can be fooled into doing something you wouldn't normally do, and think you're doing something completely different. Yeah? It works, hypnotism works the same way. You can think you're eating an apple, but it's an onion. Yeah? Right? It's the same thing. So this is what's happening. Word magic. Yeah? It says, do not put any gods before me. Yeah? But they give you an explanation that, oh no, if you worship the Most High through Jesus, right, then that's the right way. But what are you actually doing? You're worshipping Jesus. Yeah, you might think that you're worshipping the Most High through him, but what you're actually doing is just like you're eating the onion.
So you're saying that nowhere in the Old Testament is the predicted coming of the Messiah?
Well, this is the thing. I didn't want to really go there, but okay. I had no horse in the race, so I was accepting. But what I did was I started posting what I was believing on Facebook, and predictably, Christians would come to me and say, "But what about this?" So I go, "Okay, give me half an hour. Let me just read through." So I'd go and actually read where they were pointing to, and how you approach it. Okay, they would say something like, "He was born of a virgin." Yeah, so just like if you opened Fight Club in the middle of the book and it says he punched him in the face. Okay, well, who? So you've got to go back and find where it first says he, and then it will say, oh yeah, Tyler Durden did this, and he, and so on. And that's how you figure out who who it's talking about. So that's what I did. I just applied the rules of understanding a book to this book. So where it says he would be born of a virgin, I'll just go back a few chapters and see where it first says he, and then it says who he's talking about. So when you do that, it says, well, it's the children of Israel. Yeah, well, I'm not using that as an example. What I'm saying, you go back and you find it. That's who he's talking about. In this case, he was born of a virgin. It was a sign to King Ahaz, who was being attacked by the Syrians and Israel, and the Most High said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. Ask for a sign." And Ahaz said, "No, I'm not going to ask you a sign." And the Most High said, "Well, I'm going to give you a sign. A virgin," but the word virgin isn't virgin, it means a young woman. Young woman will be given, will conceive, and his name will be called Emmanuel, which means God is with us. Yeah? And by the time that child is old enough to know between good and evil, those two kings will be dead. That's the story. And in that chapter, it was fulfilled. The two kings were dead, and that's it. King Ahaz dies, and that's the end. The whole prophecy is done. Okay? And you can't apply that later on, a few hundreds of years later on.
What about Daniel chapter 9, verses 22 to 24?
Well, you know what? I can't sort of just reel off that. I'm not one of those people who can just reel off scripture like that and figure out what.
It mentions the 70-week prophecy and Christ coming in the last.
Okay, I know we don't want to go into let's prove, but Daniel is actually talking about Zerubbabel and the building of the second temple.
Yes.
It's not about Jesus coming and so on and so on.
It talks about it being ended as well.
Sorry? Yes, it did. It did get ended because the sorry about this Bible talk here. It did get ended because the enemies basically petitioned the king to say to stop building the temple, and the king said, right, "Stop, hold on, stop," and they were cut off. It's talking about the time, that they're talking about. They're not talking about something in the future. And every time somebody pointed me at something, I went, "Hold on, let me read it and let me see." And I looked, and if it said, "Yes, there's a Jesus," I would be. Yes, it's future for that time, and it was fulfilled in that time. And when you put this again to a Christian apologist, they'll say, "Oh, it's a dual prophecy." Well, where does that come in? Where does it say that all prophecies are dual? They come up with, again, word magic, so that it explains it. I'm not going to go into this. I'm not going to go into this because this is detracting from. I'm not going to go into this because this is detracting from the story I'm trying to tell. Okay.
Do you know that the Ten Commandments are Egyptian in origin? The original, the 12 negative confessions.
There's that, but you know what I found while researching, and my current research is in languages right now, looking at Paleo-Hebrew, and it turns out that Paleo-Hebrew is the original language, okay, and the hieroglyphics come from the Paleo-Hebrew, but again, that's a totally different subject, okay. So, as I said, the New Testament supplies a new God to worship, okay, and it also teaches you slave doctrine. Be a good slave, obey your master. Treat him as you would serve this new Christ God. Turn the other cheek, love your enemy. It's slave doctrine. So again, this might be hard, but Jesus is a fabrication. The Trinity is a pagan concept. Okay. It was there before Christianity. The Romans were actually sun worshippers. So that's why Christians worship the sun as in the sun. Okay. One sort of viewpoint is that every time you see Jesus, you see the halo around him. Well, what you're actually worshipping is the sun behind him and not the sun in front. That's one viewpoint. It's not something I'm saying. Picture, this face that you're seeing on screen here, is actually a chap called Cesare Borgia, one of the Borgia crime family. He was a ruthless tyrant and a paedophile and a nasty piece of work. But his father, who was the Pope Alexander, basically had Leonardo da Vinci paint all depictions of this character as his son. So the face isn't real. But I've gone through that. I say worshipping Jesus breaks the first two commandments. So in Genesis, it tells you that these Israelites were going to go into captivity and affliction for 400 years. Well, the transatlantic slave trade started in 1619. 400 years on from then is in 2 years' time.
Surely it was a reference to the time in Egypt.
No, because they weren't in affliction and slavery for 400 years. They were in affliction for the life of Moses. They were guests, honoured guests in Egypt up until the time that the new Pharaoh came in. They weren't in slavery and affliction. So this is the slavery where the curses of Deuteronomy 28 applies. And that started in 1619. This is why the New World Order is racing ahead, not caring that we know about it, not caring that we can see it, because they're running out of time. The end of slavery is approaching, and they have to have their systems in place, so that they can continue it. But they won't. It won't happen because, the Book of Remembrance isn't just a book about, past history. it's a book about future history and present history. Yeah, and it's already been written. Yeah, they are not going to succeed. The real world reference to this is that there was a book called The Making, it was a letter, the Willie Lynch letter, The Making of the Slave, which it starts off saying, if you follow my methods, and lynching was his method, that's where you get the name lynching from, Willie Lynch. If you follow my methods, you'll have a subdued slave race for 300 years. He specifically said 300 years. He wrote this in 1712. Okay, so he knew.
Who was Willie Lynch?
He was a Caribbean slave owner, and he developed ways of psychologically afflicting the slaves so that they would be subdued. And as I said, lynching was one of them. So as I said, the end of slavery approaches. And Great Britannia is no longer the great nation promised to Abraham. It's no longer Britannia because the people of the covenant aren't here, right, in great part. This is now England, or Angleland, Angel Land, the land of the fallen angels. And Anglish is literally reversed Hebrew. Okay, this is my my research now about languages, and English is literally is a backwards language. Okay, Hebrew reads right to left. Obviously, English reads left to right. Has anybody heard of somebody called David Oates?
Yeah.
Yeah, reverse speech. It's really incredible when you actually say listen to a speech from Trump, say, yeah, and he's saying one thing, you reverse his speech, and out of the gibberish will come a complete phrase that will tell you that he's saying the opposite. Yeah, language is more a lot more incredible than we can even imagine. That's going to be my next talk when I've finished all my research. But there's more going on. It's not just obvious like we think it is, but literally, English is a reverse language. You try and say something in it, with an intention, but the frequencies that you put out are the opposite. So, language is very powerful, has physical effects in the world. But unless you pronounce the words properly, yeah, you don't have the effect. So English is a reverse language which is being rolled out over the entire world because they want everybody to be disempowered. Yeah. So that's where we are. The end of slavery is approaching, and we're getting ready for it.
And Facebook now, so there's no chance.
There's no chance. No, yeah, but they control Facebook, but still.
Yeah, I know.
But that's it. We're no longer.
We know stuff now. We know stuff now. We can get it out there.
Yeah, but this is what the prophecy is saying. At the end of this, we're all going to start waking up. Yeah, and this is exactly what we're doing. This is what this is right now. This is a process of us waking up. There's things like this happening all over the world. People gathering and talking and realising that this has all been wrong. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm sorry to go on and